Hey, how's it going, folks? Thank you for all the emails and calls after last week's episode. As always, I enjoy it. And today I'm going to talk about the state of Georgia because by the time this video comes out, there may already be an indictment in the state of Georgia against our former president. And of course, we will have our dad jokes at the end of the podcast. So I want to explain what the allegations are and what the alleged violations of law are, okay? And all right, so let's do it. So just giving you a background, it's extremely important to understand kind of how our election for president system is. And it's such a quirky process, okay? So we have the election day, which in 2020 was on November 3. That was election day. Of course, there's 10 million events that happened before that in terms of who was allowed to run and who's going to be the Republican nominee, who's going to be the Democrat nominee, and all the other, independent candidates. So we're going to pick up, on election day. So election day happens November 3rd, 2020. Now, the way it's supposed to happen, it goes like this. The states then calculate their own votes. So in every state, voters go, they vote, and then the states calculate their own votes, and then they decide in the states who won, who lost that state. Now, it's very important who won a particular state, because then the electoral college is designed where whoever wins that particular state, whoever gets the majority in that state, gets all the electoral votes for that state. So if somebody just gets like 53% of Arizona, they get all the votes for Arizona. And the reason why it's designed that way is because then the states kind of have the theories, they have more power, because it's like, if we, candidates are going to want to come to our state because, they're going to care about that extra few percent so that they win all of the votes. And then whoever wins a majority of the electoral votes then becomes president. Now, this is where it gets very, very quirky. There's all these ceremonial events that happen, and for the first time, it's like very challenged in terms of these ceremonial events. After the election, and then when the states get together, and calculate their votes and everything, then the party that wins that state, they have what's called the electors. And like I've said before, it's a great job to have, because you seriously don't do anything. All you do is you go and you sign off saying, yes, our candidate won. That's it. So California has, let's say, like 54 electors. And it's calculated, every state has 2 senators, so they get 2 electoral votes, and then for every member in Congress, they get another vote. And then the Washington, D.C. gets 3 electoral votes. And then, so all of them, they just vote for whoever won that state. Okay, it's like kind of boring. It's kind of simple or ceremonial. And then they have to then decide that by December 14, 2020. So then every single state, they have their electors sign off. So all the ones in Texas all signed off saying Donald Trump won in Texas. In California, everyone signed off, President Biden, or then Joe Biden, right, won in California. Washington State, President Biden won, right? In Mississippi, Donald Trump won in Mississippi. All right. There's 7 states, okay, and Georgia is one of them. Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. In these states, then, in Wisconsin, in these particular 7 states, it was very close, right? And they also had their electors sign off in those 7 states saying Joe Biden won in these states. And then those votes, all of the votes after December 14, when the states have their people certify everything, they sign it. They sign like an official document. And here's a photocopy of the one from Georgia. It says, State of Georgia, Presidential Electoral College Certification or Certificate of vote. We, the undersigned, being duly elected and qualified electors of President and Vice President of the United States from the state of Georgia, and then they certify then Joe Biden won in the state of Georgia. And then here's the signature. So these 16 people from the state of Georgia were the electors, and then all they did is they certified Joe Biden won. They signed their names, and then the original of this document gets driven up to Washington, D.C., and hand-delivered to the state capitol. All right, and then there's this Office of the Archives and that it goes to later. And then what's supposed to happen is that on January 6th, after Christmas and New Year's, Congress comes in, and then all of the certificates from all the different states and Washington, D.C., they're just tabulated in Congress, and then ultimately the vice president signs off saying this person got 275 electoral votes. He's the president, that's it. It's all basically supposed to be somewhat ceremonial, right? And just FYI, if there isn't a candidate that gets 270, then you know how the president is elected. Or I should do the Jeopardy one. The House of Representatives votes. Okay, that's only happened 2 times, and that was in the early 1800s, where then the House of Representatives votes because no candidate got more than half the electoral votes. And then the vice president signs off, and then we have our presidential winner. Now, we don't usually have to wait until January 6th. It's kind of like on election day or a couple days after, when everything's voted, we kind of know who's going to be the president. And then all of these other things are just the technicalities that have to happen for everything to be kind of documented and registered correctly. Now comes, years of all this investigation and criminal charges and, indemnity agreements and immunity agreements and all these other things. What the allegation is, what happened in the state of Georgia and those other states, but we're focusing just on Georgia because it's likely that they may indict the president, the former president of the United States. And it's just crazy when this is what a lot of people kind of like what was going on. All right. So after the election, as we all remember, there was these allegations of voter fraud, dead people voting twice, illegal aliens voting, real aliens voting, from outer space. Right? And all these people coming in with fake votes in the middle of Detroit in the middle of the night and dumping it, and votes being thrown out, and post office delivery people being executed so they can't deliver votes. That one was a joke, right? So there were all those allegations after November 3rd. Okay, fine. They were investigated. There was proper court proceedings. Donald Trump was alleging that there was fraud, which nobody says is criminal. He can go out and say that he thinks there was fraud. Nobody is charging him with that, okay? So there were all these things. So anyway, after a month, it was pretty clear that these massive voter fraud allegations were not true. And that indeed hundreds of thousands of people, one allegation was over 200,000 dead votes in Pennsylvania, or, 200,000 more votes than there were voters. That wasn't true, So then in the state of Georgia, we had these electors that were meeting. Is it electors or electors? I wish the Constitution, when it drafts this, and then they had that little pronunciation thing, but I'm going to go with electors. But if I say it fast, I might say electors. Anyhow, so in the state of Georgia, these 16 people met on December 14th and signed this, and then sent it, the route that it goes to the Washington, D.C., different states could do it differently if they want. But in the state of Georgia, the electors convene, they meet, they sign this, they give it to the state capital, that legislative body or the governor look at it all over and say, okay, this is awesome, this checks out, and then they drive it to Washington, D.C. What the allegation of President Trump and his cohorts and other election officials or wannabe officials, what they did is they they convinced 16 other people to pretend that they were the electors, all right? And that these other 16 people, they convinced, okay, because it was all done fraudulently, and we have here this one representative from the state, and we're picking you to become the, an elector. And they convinced these other 16 people to physically get together in the state of Georgia, and they convinced them to kind of physically convene, and that they would print these documents, and they called it Certificate of the Voters of the 2020 Electors from Georgia. And that they would print these documents. This is, like physically printed. Because remember, the Constitution, there's no email. So everything's like physically printed, physically transported to the state capital, then physically transported to the nation capital. And these 16 good people or bad people, whatever you want to call them, they then convened in Fulton County in Atlanta at noon on December 14. They got together. David Schaffer presiding and Sean Still served as secretary for the meeting. And then we have the 16 people: Joe Brannon, James Carroll, Vicky Consiglio, Carol Fisher, Burt Jones, blah, blah. There's like 16 of these people. And then they state here that the undersigned electors from the state of Georgia cast each of their representative ballots for vice president and president as follows. Donald Trump for president, and Michael Pence winning for vice president. And then these people then signed this certificate. They signed the certificate. And what then happened after they signed this, and all of this is fake, right? It's all fake. It's all something that the David Schaefer, he's the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. So he's not, elected official to do this. He's just in the Republican Party in the state of Georgia, and he got these folks together and he told them to do this and whatnot, right? And then they all signed this. Then after they signed the original copy of this, they then, some of them walked it over to the Georgia State Senate, all right? And then the Georgia State Senate, the officer came out, and back then they weren't, it was really goofy. They weren't really open the state capitol because it was COVID. So this guard comes out with the face mask and all, and he's looking at them. He's like, "Who are you?" They're like, "Oh, we're here to give you the electoral college votes." And he's looking at them. He's like, "Who the hell are you?
Who are you?"
And they kept trying to give it to him. And who the hell are you? It's like my kids when I say, "Hey, did you guys clean your room?" They look at me like, "Who are you?
Who are you?"
So that's how the guard looked at them. So they couldn't kind of get it through to the state Senate. So then they physically took the same documents to Congress later. So this is all kind of, it's so crazy. The goal was that the state of Georgia, the governor or the secretary of state for Georgia, that the goal was that they would accept these fake votes instead of the real votes. All right. And that way, when the tabulation went down in the federal Congress, then the President Trump would have more electoral votes than Biden. So the state of Georgia, the governor and the secretary of state for Georgia, they weren't going along with the plan, and that's where that infamous phone call, Donald Trump and the secretary of state of Georgia, where Donald Trump says, you got to find me the 11th 7,800 votes. I know you could find them because the whole thing was fraud. It was this, that. So he was trying to convince them that the whole thing was done fraudulently, and in essence, like telling them this has to be accepted because the whole thing was done fraudulently. But anyway, the bottom line was the state of Georgia, the governor, the secretary of state, they weren't going along with this. So it didn't work. It didn't work. Is that the end of the story? Is it over?
Nothing is over! Nothing!
Okay. No. Then what happens is, all of that happens by December 14th, the different states. And this was, I'm just focusing on Georgia, but something similar happened in Arizona, similar happened in Michigan. All right. So anyhow, then by the rule in the Constitution, the ceremonial events, everyone breaks for Christmas, everyone breaks for Hanukkah, for New Year's, blah, 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 right? So then on January 6th, the federal Congress in Washington, D.C., they then convene with the vice president, and it's physically in boxes, like the good old days, like there's physical box. Here's a picture of the physical boxes. That is the electoral votes. That's all the certificates from California, from Maine, from New Hampshire, Texas, everywhere, right? So all of those physical votes from these electors are in these physical boxes. Then Congress, I'm glad we're spending millions of dollars on Congress. They open up these things, they kind of like open it and they count it. And the vice president who's presiding over all of this, being Mike Pence at the time, he is supposed to look us over and he says, okay, Texas, how did the electors vote? Okay, all 45 of them or voted for Trump. Okay, put that on Trump. Mississippi, they all voted for Trump. Okay, California, all 54 voted for Biden. All right, blah, blah, blah. Then when Georgia came up, they calculated the proper ones. All right. So these 16 for Georgia voted for Biden. The goal, the fake document, got its way up to the federal Congress, and this is part of why Donald Trump was telling he was on Twitter and he said, come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. The goal was for, the people to protest. All right. Some say he called for them to protest peacefully. Some say he called for them to protest as loud and violently as possible. I'm only a lawyer, so I'm just saying, what happened. So the goal was that there'd be enough protest, peaceful or whatever the goal was, that it would kind of convince Mike Pence, to calculate the fake votes, or at least Mike Pence saying, well, there's two sets of votes, so I'm not going to count anything, and I'm not going to certify anybody as the victor. And if nobody's going to be certified, then let's just keep the current president. That was the goal. Or that I'm not going to certify everyone, just take it back to the states and just have a new vote or a new, proceeding or a new investigation or something. That was the goal. Now, Mike Pence didn't go along with it. And that's that, right? Now, the current criminal allegation against Donald Trump from the state of Georgia. Now, the state of Georgia is going to allege that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and this lawyer with, I shouldn't even call him a lawyer, Eastman, all these folks, they conspired with David Schaefer, the head of the Republican Party there, the chairman of the Republican Party, and these fake electors. They all conspired, meaning they all got together. They all agreed to have this fake votes. And now keep in mind, people have gone to prison if they just tried to vote 2 times, like in a state election or something, or they tried to vote like a few times. This is different. This is trying to vote, 15 million times, or however many votes people voted in the state of Georgia, because there's 16 electoral votes. So anyhow, so this is millions and millions of votes that they're trying to change by having these 16 electors. So the allegation for them to prevail, they have to prove that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, right, and his, Rudy Giuliani, and, that they knew about this, that they encouraged this, that they didn't stop this, that they wanted this, that they encouraged this, right? Because that's how they have to be in on it. If it was a group of people like that want Donald Trump to win and they were doing all this and Donald Trump had no involvement, then, there's no case against Donald Trump. Maybe there's a case against the other people, but not against Donald Trump, right? So it's hard to prove that somebody is in on something, that somebody's encouraged something. You would have to have that person saying it or writing it or tweeting about it. Did Donald Trump tweet about this? Okay, well, let's see. January. He has so many tweets about this that it would be impossible for me to go over all of them. On January 6th, the states want to redo their votes. They found out they voted on a fraud. Legislatures never approved. Let them do it. Be strong. So he's saying, that was one of the many tweets of kind of saying that, this whole process was done wrong. The electoral votes were done wrong. Like, let it go back to the states. States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process, never received legislative approval, which it did. Like, the real electoral votes were submitted. Here's the big one. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is time for extreme courage. So this is the weird part. He is like in public with the whole country, and he later admits it wasn't his account that got hacked. It was him writing these. He's telling Mike Pence to approve the fake votes, or count the fake votes, or consider the fake votes, and not properly count the valid votes so that either he wins the election or it gets delayed to the point of past the inauguration, which then, it's going to be difficult to try to certify a president when the Constitution says they have to be certified by a certain date. Do you see what I'm saying? And this tweet is nuts because it's going to be hard then for somebody to say, well, Donald Trump didn't know about this scheme. Donald Trump didn't approve of it when he's tweeting about it, right? And then, okay, did he say after, when Mike Pence did approve the proper votes, did he say something like, good job, Mike Pence, for doing it right? No! After Mike Pence signed off on everything, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, meaning, the fake votes, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. U.S. demands the truth. So he's saying that Mike Pence didn't have the courage to count the fake votes, but instead he counted the correct votes. So of course Donald Trump is saying that the correct votes were the fake votes and the fake votes were the correct votes, and that Michael Pence didn't have the courage to calculate what Donald Trump said were the correct votes. So all of this is showing he knew that this was going on. He encouraged Mike Pence openly, and Mike Pence had stated that he was getting called and communicated from Donald Trump to do this. And then Donald Trump, he couldn't do it, like he couldn't convince Mike Pence, so he would go on Twitter to pressure him to do it, right? So it's not going to be a tough case for prosecutors to prove that Donald Trump was in on it, even if he doesn't testify. How can you, this is another tweet, It's on January 4, a couple days before. How can you certify an election when the numbers being certified are verifiably wrong? You know, that was all in caps. You will see the real numbers tonight during my speech, but especially on January 6th. Republicans have pluses and minuses, but one thing is sure, they never forget. And there's Twitter. This claim about election fraud is disputed. Yikes. So once again, I mean, the evidence is overwhelming in just his tweets. And then you have, you know, his speeches where he was saying the same things. You have all these different witnesses like Michael Pence and all these other, politicians saying, his former Attorney General Bill Barr, all of them saying, look, we all told him that the election was not rigged, that it was not done wrong. And he was telling us it was rigged and that you have to calculate these other votes and that you cannot certify the election on January 6th. So we have here the President of the United States pressuring the Vice President and all these other officials not to hold this ceremonial, it's always been, thing where we could just kind of certify all of this. If Vice President, this one is also January 6th, but early in the morning, if Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistakes they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures. Mike can send it back. So again, I mean, I would have to be here for a few hours to go over all of the evidence. Now, this is nothing is ever easy with lawyers, right? It's a big process to try to indict the former president, and it's an even bigger process when you have a state that wants to do it. Now, I did a podcast on the state of New York's indictment of Donald Trump, and I said that one was nonsense. Like, that one is going to be thrown out. It will not win. The state of New York had a really bad case. It was Alvin Bragg. He has a really bad case against Donald Trump, but whatever, they indicted him anyway. That one I predict will lose, and that one has no merit, I felt, and you could watch that episode. This one is a lot different. Okay. The process in the state of Georgia. Oh, there was a song. Do you remember that? Do you know the song's called "The Devil Went Down to Georgia"? He was looking for a soul to steal, right? Okay, during Al Gore and George Bush, when that election, when they had to recalculate in the state of Florida and everything. So there was a parody. Al Gore went down to Florida. He was looking for a few votes to steal. So this one's like Donald Trump went down to Georgia looking for a few votes to steal. Anyway, that was all a parody. Mine is a parody of the very good song. Some of these guys back here are looking at me like, yes, there was music when I was a kid. Okay, I'm not that old, dude. All right. So the state of Georgia. So we have here a district attorney in Georgia, in Atlanta, Fannie Willis. And this particular district attorney has spent a few years going after all of this. And what she has done is so she petitioned to start what's called a grand jury. And the idea of the grand jury is, and it goes back to freaking the Magna Carta in England when people were worried because they would just indict or charge random people or people, for political reasons, they would charge somebody. So there's a process where to charge someone for certain crimes, it's better if you have the blessing, so to speak, of a grand jury. So you convene, citizens, and then you present evidence to these citizens, and if they think that charges should be filed, they could sign off on it and then send it to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor could use that when they charge the alleged criminal. Okay, so she has been at it for a few years, and what I'm reading is there's all these documents. It's so I could have just a whole. I got 3 podcasts just on that particular proceeding. So she had to convene the grand jury, then present evidence. And every single thing that she has tried to do, there would be challenges to it. She wanted Rudy Giuliani to testify. He challenged it. He said, no, I'm not going to testify. No, I don't have to be there. And no, you can't ask me to be there, right? She tried to, these 16 fake electors, she wanted to investigate all of them. them. Then the Republican Party hired lawyers for them and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for lawyers to tell these people, that no, you don't have to testify, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. Then she just recently gave immunity deals to 8 of the 16. And what that means is that they signed off saying, okay, I'm allowed to testify. I could say whatever I want about this, and whatever I did do, the state of Georgia agrees they will not prosecute me. Now that's beautiful, because then they could come out and say, oh yeah, the head of the Republican Party told me to do this. Like, we convened on this and this date. They told us to sign this. They told us that this was a fair way to do it. They told us that President Trump is with us, and blah, blah, blah. So they want all of that testimony. And obviously, that is being challenged. President Trump, his lawyers filed a motion to disqualify her as the district attorney, saying she's biased, she's unfair, that she hates Donald Trump, and she's not a fair prosecutor. Ultimately, the state of Georgia ruled that was they rejected that claim, saying, no, we're going to let her be the prosecutor. And then Donald Trump has, filed certain things saying this is an illegal proceeding, that all of this was proper, speech or whatever. And then that was denied. And then he filed an appeal. So just to get the grand jury signing off on this has taken a few years because of all of these procedural issues. And I think, it has been a few years, and it's almost there. Like any day now, she could probably file her case against Donald Trump. And then where the heck do we go from there? Wow. If there is a case against Donald Trump for this, that will take a long time because of all these different reasons. I think that he's guilty. I think he's guilty. I don't think he's innocent. I think he was. I could assure you that if Joe Samo and his buddies tried to do something like this, it would just be insane. Like we would go to jail. If I just got a group of people together just to be like, hey, listen, I got an idea. Let's just steal a bunch of absentee votes, or the votes that get mailed to people's homes. Not the votes, the ballots that get mailed to people's homes. Let's just steal a bunch of them, like 50 of them. Our goal is to steal just 50 of them and then vote for them and then send it in. Like, if all I did was that with a few people, I could go to jail for several years. And this one was just like that, to the tune of dozens of millions of votes, because by changing the electoral votes, they represent all those millions of people. Now, a lot of people will say, but what about Hunter Biden? What about Hunter Biden? Okay, fine. He pleaded guilty to other things, like what was it, a tax issue or something? It was nothing like this, but yes, he's not going to go to jail. And look, the prosecutors here, I assure you, they are not going to get Donald Trump in prison. That is not going to happen. Donald Trump will not, under any circumstances, ever go behind bars. He's not ever going to go to jail. The only goal here is to get him to either agree that he did this, agree it was illegal, or if they have a trial, just to get some sort of guilty verdict. That is their goal. And then if that does happen, the punishment or sentence or whatever will not include any jail time, So it's not that, I just think they're trying to pursue getting a conviction. That's what prosecutors do. They're just trying to say, hey, the law was violated. We want to go after him. All right. What do we do at the end of every session here? A couple of dad jokes. All right. Did you like last week's dad jokes? Oh, yay. Yeah, I did get some people that liked it. What's Forrest Gump's password? 1, Forrest 1. Why or what do sprinters eat before they race? Nothing. They fast. What was the fish's grade? Oh, why was the fish's grades bad? Because they were below sea level. Last one. What do cows read the most? Catalogs. See you next week.